The private jet gleamed under the afternoon California sun, its sleek body promising luxury only the richest could touch. Inside the cabin oozed exclusivity, plush leather seats, gold accents, and ambient lighting designed to flatter expensive watches and tailored suits. Passengers rolled in with expensive carry-ons, some sipping champagne before even buckling their belts. The atmosphere buzzed with whispered deals and self-importance. Then she stepped in. Amara Johnson, a poised black woman in her late 30s, walked through the doorway. Her tailored navy blue blazer hugged her figure, her black slacks sharp, her low-heeled shoes simple but pristine. Her hair was pulled back into a sleek bun and her makeup was minimal, just enough to highlight her striking features. Calm confidence radiated from her, though she made no attempt to flaunt it. Heads turned, eyes narrowed. Not because Amara did anything wrong, because she wasn't what they expected. At the front stood Lauren Parks, the lead flight attendant, early 40s hair, sprayed into a perfect helmet uniform, starched to an unforgiving stiffness. She prided herself on maintaining order, which usually meant keeping people like Amara in their place. Lauren's fake smile wavered the moment she laid eyes on Amara. The greeting that had been warm for others turned cold professional. "Welcome aboard," Lauren said flatly, eyes flicking over Amara's tailored outfit like she was a stray that had wandered in from the tarmac. Behind Amara, Mr. and Mrs. Cartwright, a white couple in their 60s dripping with old money. Energy stepped up Lauren's demeanor instantly, shifted, bright smile, sing-song voice. "Mr. Cartwright, Mrs. Cartwright, we're so thrilled to have you back." Amara watched her face, a portrait of calm. She noticed the shift, the easy discrimination baked into Lauren's every move, but she said nothing. She simply moved toward her assigned seat, third row window, setting her neat leather carry-on under the seat with care. Lauren stalked after her. "You must be mistaken," Lauren said crisply, her voice pitched just loud enough for nearby passengers to catch. "This section is reserved for premium guests." Amara looked up, her voice soft but firm. "This is my seat." Lauren's nostrils flared. She crossed her arms, her stance widening like she was preparing to eject a trespasser. "I don't think so. Please move to the back before we have a situation." From across the aisle, Bryce Hamilton, a hedge fund kid with a $10,000 watch and a matching ego, smirked. "They letting janitors right up front now?" he muttered loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. A ripple of snickers passed through the cabin. The businessman in seat 2D frowned, but said nothing. Amara straightened her back. "You might want to double-check your list," she said, her tone almost kind. Lauren scoffed, not even glancing at the tablet in her hand. "I know who belongs here." She snapped, her voice rising, drawing more eyes, more judgment. Passengers whispered, phones subtly lifted to record. Somebody muttered, "Trying to sneak in, clearly." Someone else chuckled. "Probably couldn't even afford coach." Amara sat calmly, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "I'm not moving," she said simply. Lauren's cheeks flushed pink, but not from embarrassment, from rage. "If you don't move to the back," she hissed, "I'm calling security." Amara tilted her head, her voice a quiet blade. "Call whoever you need," she said. "I'll be right here." Gasps rippled down the rows. A woman in designer sunglasses, 2 rows up, whispered to her friend, "Can you believe the nerve?" Lauren turned sharply to the younger flight attendant, Grace Porter, standing awkwardly near the galley. "Escort her to the back," Lauren barked. Grace hesitated, her fingers trembling on her tablet. She glanced toward the passenger list, the truth itching at her conscience. Lauren snapped, "Don't think, do it." Amara sat still, the storm swirling around her, while she remained the eye. "You really don't want to do this," she said, her voice like steel, wrapped in velvet. Lauren sneered. "I know exactly what I'm doing." She had no idea. The air crackled with tension. The cabin, once a playground for the privileged, had become a loaded chamber, one misstep away from explosion. And Amara Johnson. She hadn't even begun to fight yet. Lauren's polished shoes clicked sharply against the carpet as she stormed off toward the cockpit, her face twisted in barely contained fury. Around her, murmurs rippled like wildfire. Passengers leaned into each other, whispering, smirking, waiting for the intruder to be thrown out. Amara sat serene. Her hands rested lightly on the armrests, her posture unshakable. She was not moving. Not an inch. Across the aisle, Bryce pulled out his phone and started recording openly, now grinning like a wolf. "This is gonna be good," he whispered to the woman next to him who giggled behind her designer scarf. The young flight attendant, Grace, stood frozen by the galley. Her eyes darted between the passenger manifest and Amara. She knew. She knew Amara was supposed to be here. But fear kept her glued to the floor. Lauren returned, marching straight up to Amara, flanked now by a broad-shouldered security officer from the ground crew summoned in haste. "This is your last chance," Lauren barked, her voice slicing through the cabin. "Move to the back." The words hung heavy in the charged air. Every set of eyes locked onto Amara, waiting for her to break, to plead, to apologize for daring to exist in a space not meant for her. Instead, Amara looked up. Her face composed her tone, gentle but absolute. "I suggest you stop this now," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The flight attendant laughed sharply, a brittle, ugly sound. "And why would I do that?" she snapped. Amara smiled faintly, a slow, knowing smile. She reached for her phone. One message, already typed, already sent. The reply came almost instantly. At the front of the plane, the pilot's headset crackled to life. He listened for a moment, then stiffened, like he'd been struck. The blood drained from his face. He stood up so abruptly, his chair toppled behind him. Without a word, he strode into the cabin, cutting through the growing tension like a blade. Passengers turned, confusion flickering across their faces. Lauren opened her mouth to bark at him, but the pilot raised a hand, silencing her. "Miss Johnson?" he said loudly, bowing slightly. "Ma'am, I apologize for this terrible misunderstanding." The cabin went dead silent. Even the air seemed to freeze. Lauren blinked, her lips parting, but no words came out. Bryce lowered his phone, his smirk sliding off his face. The nosy woman, 2 rows up, dropped her champagne glass, the stem shattering against the carpet. The businessman in seat 2D smiled quietly to himself, as if he'd suspected the truth all along. Amara rose from her seat slowly. Grace stepped back wide-eyed, clutching the manifest to her chest. The pilot cleared his throat, his face a portrait of mortification. For those unaware, he continued, voice carrying to every stunned ear, "Miss Amara Johnson is not only our highest-tier frequent flyer," he swallowed hard, "she's also the new majority shareholder of this airline." The weight of his words crashed through the cabin. Shock, shame, disbelief. Lauren staggered back a step, her face draining of color. The security officer backed away so fast he nearly tripped over a seat. Bryce's mouth opened and closed like a gasping fish. His phone slipped from his hand, clattering to the floor. Amara adjusted the cuffs of her blazer with slow, measured grace. "I told you," she said quietly, her voice slicing deeper than any scream ever could. "You didn't know who you were dealing with." Lauren's lips trembled. I didn't mean," she stammered. Amara's smile didn't reach her eyes. "You meant every word," she said, voice still soft, still deadly, "and now you'll face every consequence." Passengers shifted in their seats, suddenly very aware that they'd been complicit, that they'd laughed too soon, judged too quickly. The businessman in 2D shook his head slowly. Others looked down at their laps, shame thick in the air. The captain turned to Lauren, his voice ironed. "You are relieved of your duties, effective immediately." Gasps burst across the cabin. Lauren's knees buckled slightly. She clutched the seat back for support. But, she choked out. "No buts," the pilot said coldly. "Escort her off the plane." 2 uniformed security officers, real ones this time, stepped into the cabin. Lauren whimpered, shrinking under the weight of every single gaze. As they led her down the aisle, the cabin was silent, save for the soft click of Amara's heels as she returned to her seat. This time, no one dared to look at her the wrong way. No one whispered, no one chuckled. Only respect and regret filled the cabin now. And Amara. She simply sat back, fastened her seatbelt, and pulled out a book. Unbothered, unshaken, unforgettable. The luxury cabin buzzed, but it wasn't with excitement anymore. It buzzed with shame. The passengers shifted uneasily in their designer clothes, their faces pale and downcast. The laughter from earlier, the jeers, the whispered jokes hung in the air like smoke from a burning bridge. No one could look Amara Johnson in the eye. Not anymore. She sat with quiet authority, her book open in her lap, but she wasn't reading. Her posture was composed, her chin slightly raised, her very presence a silent testament to what real power looked like. Across the aisle, Bryce fumbled with his fallen phone, his fingers clumsy. His earlier cockiness was gone, replaced by frantic scrolling, deleting the video he had gleefully recorded just minutes ago. Too late. The businessman in 2D, Mr. Sullivan, watched him with a disapproving shake of his head. There was no wiping away the stain of what had happened here. Not from memory, not from history. At the back of the plane, Lauren sat alone, her uniform wrinkled and her face drawn tight with panic. The shame clung to her like a second skin, every whisper, every sidelong glance, a dagger to the gut. The cabin manager approached her, flanked by one of the assistants. Their faces were grim. Lauren Mitchell. The manager said coldly, "You are to remain seated until security boards. You will be escorted off the aircraft." Lauren's mouth opened, trembling. I didn't know." She whispered the excuse, hollow even to her own ears. The assistant didn't even flinch. "That's exactly the problem," he said. At the front, Amara closed her book with a soft thud and turned her gaze to the window. The clouds drifted lazily by, oblivious to the storm that had just erupted inside the plane. She breathed deeply, slowly, letting the cool air calm the fire in her chest. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about humiliation. It was about dignity. It was about showing every soul on that plane, and far beyond that, respect isn't a luxury for the few, it's a right for everyone. A small alert flashed across the in-flight monitors. Update flight has been temporarily grounded for review. Passengers muttered uneasily. Their trip had been delayed because of a single woman's quiet refusal to be degraded, and no one could blame her. In fact, some began to realize they were grateful. Maybe, just maybe, this was the lesson they needed to witness. Mr. Sullivan, who had watched everything unfold with calm detachment, finally stood. He cleared his throat softly, drawing the attention of those around him. Facing Amara, he gave a small, respectful bow. Nothing exaggerated, nothing showy, just a simple, sincere gesture. On behalf of everyone who should have spoken up sooner, he said, voice low but carrying, "I'm sorry." A few other passengers followed his lead. Nods murmured apologies. It wasn't enough to erase the harm, but it was a start. Amara inclined her head slightly, accepting the gesture with grace, but offering no easy absolution. The wound had been cut too deep for that. At the back, Lauren's chest heaved with shallow, panicked breaths. The plane's door opened with a hiss of compressed air. 2 security officers boarded their presence undeniable, their movements efficient. "Lauren Mitchell," one asked. She nodded weakly. "Please come with us." The passengers watched in silence as Lauren was escorted down the aisle, her steps stiff, her head bowed. As she passed Amara's seat, she paused just for a moment. Their eyes met. Lauren's lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. Because what apology could undo what had been done? Amara held her gaze calm and unyielding, until Lauren finally dropped her eyes and hurried away, swallowed by the waiting world outside. The cabin door closed with a heavy thud, a final punctuation mark on a story no one aboard would ever forget. Back in her seat, Amara exhaled slowly. The storm had passed, but the impact the message would echo long after the engines roared back to life. And somewhere deep down, she knew. Today wasn't just about one black woman refusing to move. It was about every silent moment before this one finally finding its voice. It was about 1,000 unseen battles. It was about dignity reclaimed. And the skies would never look the same again. The private airport terminal buzzed with a quiet but undeniable electricity. Whispers traveled like wildfire. "Did you hear? It was the owner herself. She was mistreated on her own plane." Inside the sleek, glass-walled VIP lounge, the media frenzy had already begun. Paparazzi with long lenses milled outside the security gates, hoping to catch a glimpse. Bloggers, news anchors, and social commentators scrambled to piece together the story of Amara Johnson, the woman who had quietly dismantled arrogance with nothing but calm dignity. Meanwhile, Amara stepped down from the aircraft, her navy slacks still damp from the spilled water, but her back impossibly straight. Waiting for her at the bottom of the stairs was her assistant, Jordan. He opened the door of a black SUV with a respectful nod. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked quietly. Amara offered him a small smile. "I'm better than ever," she said softly. As the SUV pulled away from the tarmac, Amara turned on her phone. It was flooded with notifications. Social media was on fire. Clips from the plane, recorded secretly by passengers, had already gone viral. Hashtags blazed across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Jarsir Amara Sands, Mershrojalis, respect in the skies. Not your stereotype. The first clip showed Lauren towering over Amara, her voice dripping with condescension. The second captured the moment Amara stood her ground without raising her voice. The third, already reaching millions, captured her final words. "Respect isn't a luxury, it's a right." The internet erupted. Celebrities tweeted support. Activists amplified the moment. Journalists demanded accountability. Within hours, the story spread beyond the aviation world. It became a cultural touchstone about race, dignity, and power. In a penthouse office downtown, the CEO of Skyline Airways, the parent company of Amara's private airline, watched the story unfold with growing dread. Beside him, the director of public relations wiped his sweating forehead. "We have to issue a statement immediately." The PR director stammered. "We have to salvage." The CEO cut him off. "No," he said grimly. "You don't salvage when you mistreat the woman who owns half the fleet." He slammed a fist onto the polished desk. "You apologize, and then you change everything." Meanwhile, Amara's team mobilized behind the scenes. By evening, an official statement went live on all major networks. Skyline Airways deeply apologizes to Miss Amara Johnson for the appalling treatment she endured aboard one of our aircraft. We are implementing immediate changes to ensure respect and equality for all passengers effective today. But Amara knew words weren't enough. She called a press conference. Standing before a sea of flashing cameras, Amara took the podium. No designer gown, no staged glamour. Just her, a black woman, dressed simply in navy and white, calm, unshaken. Her voice rang clear over the murmuring crowd. Dignity is not determined by wealth, race, or status. It is a basic human right. I didn't stand up today just for myself. I stood up for every person who has ever been told through action or word that they were less. I stood up to remind the world. Respect flies higher than any plane. The room erupted into thunderous applause. Reporters shouted questions, desperate for sound bites, but Amara raised a hand for silence. "I'm not here to drag anyone down," she continued. "I'm here to lift standards up." That night, television screens across America flickered with images of Amara's quiet strength. Talk shows praised her opinion columns, lauded her grace. Social media turned her into a living symbol of unshakable dignity. A little girl in Brooklyn tweeted, "I want to be strong like Miss Amara someday." A retired teacher in Atlanta posted, "This story reminds me that character, not status, is what makes a leader." The world wasn't just watching, it was listening. As Amara rode home late that night, the city lights blurred past the windows. Her assistant Jordan glanced back at her from the front seat. "You changed something today, ma'am," he said quietly. Amara smiled, faintly gazing out into the sprawling skyline. "No," she whispered, "we all did." The next morning, the world awoke to a different skyline. Not one shaped by glass towers or glittering tarmacs, but by something far rarer, a collective call for change. Across news outlets, Amara Johnson's story wasn't just trending, it was reshaping the conversation. Major airlines rushed to update their training manuals. CEOs issued internal memos demanding cultural sensitivity workshops. Industry leaders scrambled to review policies on implicit bias. But for Amara, it was never about PR. It was about real accountability. In her downtown office, sleek, sun-drenched minimalist, Amara gathered her leadership team. Around the conference table sat executives, PR heads, and customer service directors from across her aviation empire. She stood at the head of the room, her presence calm yet magnetic. "We're not issuing empty apologies," she said, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "We're not putting up performative posters. We are rebuilding the standard from the inside out." The room fell silent. Amara outlined her vision. Mandatory anti-bias and respect, training for all crew and staff. zero-tolerance policy for racial discrimination enforced through independent audits, direct reporting channels for passengers facing unfair treatment bypassing traditional bureaucracy, promotion system overhaul to prioritize character over just experience, free scholarships for minority youth pursuing careers in aviation. No one, she said firmly, should ever have to earn basic respect with their bank account, their skin tone, or their last name. Heads nodded. A few executives, grizzled veterans of corporate battles, felt a lump rise in their throats. Because Amara wasn't just leading a company anymore. She was setting the new code for an entire industry. Meanwhile, Lauren, the disgraced former flight attendant, faced her own reckoning. The footage of her slap had spread faster than wildfire. Not even her PR firm's desperate spin could save her. News anchors called it the moment arrogance met justice. Commentators dissected every frame. Civil rights leaders praised Amara's restraint, contrasting it with Lauren's explosive prejudice. Within a week, Lauren's name was blacklisted across the aviation sector. No airline wanted her. No private club would accept her membership renewal. No PR campaign could wash the stain from her reputation. One evening, she sat alone in her small apartment, scrolling through job postings that read, minimum wage, no experience necessary. And she realized Amara's strength hadn't just ended her career, it had exposed a rot she could never pretend didn't exist. Elsewhere, change moved faster than even Amara had imagined. At airports nationwide, passengers noticed it first. Smiles that weren't forced. Staff addressing everyone with respect no matter how they dressed or spoke. Training programs rolled out quietly but consistently. Small changes, yes. But millions of small changes could build a revolution. 1 month later, Amara stood once again at the VIP terminal. But this time, not as a passenger. She was here to unveil something new, the Naomi Standard. A new certification program named after her late grandmother Naomi Johnson, a woman who had taught Amara that grace and dignity were the ultimate luxuries. Any airline lounge or staff that completed the program would be Naomi certified. A mark that said, here you are seen, here you are valued. The media was everywhere, but Amara didn't care about cameras. She cared about the teenage black girls watching at home, the immigrant families stepping onto planes for the first time, the corporate travelers who wouldn't have to shrink themselves to fit someone else's idea of who belonged. Amara took the stage. The applause was thunderous. She smiled modest but radiant and spoke, "We cannot always control how others see us, but we can demand the world sees everyone through the lens of dignity. Respect is not a privilege. It is a right. And today, we raise that standard for everyone." Tears shimmered in the eyes of many. The standing ovation lasted long after Amara left the stage. As she exited the terminal, Jordan, her assistant, caught up with her. "You know," he said, half joking, "you've ruined first class forever. People will actually expect kindness now." Amara laughed softly, the sound carrying like a song. "Good," she said. "Kindness should be the first upgrade they receive." Outside, the sun blazed high over the runway, casting long shadows behind Amara as she walked away, unshaken, unstoppable. She hadn't just changed a policy, she had changed the sky itself. And for millions who would board planes after her, it would never be the same again. Weeks later, Amara found herself back where her journey truly began. Not in a boardroom, not in a private jet, but in a modest neighborhood on the south side of Chicago, the place that had shaped her strength long before the world ever learned her name. The afternoon sun bathed the cracked sidewalks in gold. Children raced their bikes down the block, laughter echoing off the brick walls. Amara parked her car quietly near a familiar house. The small, weathered porch, the faded white shutters, the scent of jasmine from the neighbor's garden drifting on the breeze. She climbed the steps, her heart swelling. Inside, in a cozy living room lined with old photographs, her mother sat knitting in her favorite chair. When she looked up and saw Amara, her eyes lit up their warmth, eclipsing every spotlight Amara had ever stood under. "You're home," her mother said simply, as if no time had passed at all. Amara crossed the room and knelt beside her, resting her head against her mother's knee. "I needed to remember," she whispered. "Remember what?" her mother asked gently. Amara smiled, her voice catching in her throat. "That no matter how high you fly, You must always keep your feet planted in the soil that raised you. Her mother's hand brushed through Amara's curls, the same way she had done when Amara was a little girl, dreaming about the skies. You always had wings. Her mother said, her voice soft but sure. You just needed the world to see them. That evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Amara and her mother sat on the porch, sipping sweet tea. Neighbors stopped by one. Some brought pie, some brought hugs, all brought smiles. And when they spoke, they didn't mention the millions of views or the viral headlines. They simply said, "You made us proud." Not because she was rich, not because she was famous, but because when the moment came, when the world told her she was small, she stood tall. Not for herself alone, but for every person who had ever been overlooked, talked down to, or told they didn't belong. As twilight settled, Amara looked up at the stars beginning to prick the sky. A breeze tugged at her hair, and she closed her eyes for a moment, breathing it all in. The battles behind her, the victories ahead, the unbreakable dignity that carried her through them all. She didn't need applause, she didn't need titles. She had something far rarer. She had changed the world and kept her soul intact. And in the hush of the night, surrounded by the people who had loved her, long before the world knew her name, Amara Johnson smiled at peace.